I just burned $1 million to tell you they're printing trillions. First, I'm going to talk about the million, then the trillions. So remember that $1 million bet from a few weeks ago? I actually settled it up front. I settled it early, $500,000 to Bitcoin Core, $500,000 to Give Directly, $500,000 to Medlock. You can check those links on chain. You can read details at balajios.com/fiat. There are just some legal details to work out, but that is now done. That's provable. You can go and check it. So that takes care of the million. That's a proof of work. Now let's talk about the trillions. So the reason that I did this is I wanted to tell you in a provable way that to send a provable signal that there was something wrong in the economy. I'm not in the habit of just burning $1 million for the sake of it. There's something wrong in the economy and the state isn't telling you about it. And things could unwind very fast. And just to give you a sense of how fast, well, it was 2 days from the collapse of SVB to the government printing $300 billion. It was 2 weeks for $500 billion to make its way out of local banks seeking safety. It was 2 months from patient zero of the coronavirus hitting the US. After weeks of denial, suddenly lockdown came in March with very little warning, so just 2 months. It was 2 quarters from when Ben Bernanke said it was going to be only a mild recession in 2008 to the global financial crisis being acknowledged as such in September 2008. And it was 2 years for the USSR to go from superpower to total collapse. And so in each of these cases, too slow was being too late. The thing is, right now in the economy, many things are breaking at once. Let's start with the debt ceiling. This is perhaps the most unambiguous, the one that everybody agrees on. You have markets estimating a record high probability of sovereign default for the US. You have former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers saying there's a 2 to 3% chance of this happening. You have journalists at the Washington Post saying, hey, just the fact that we managed to get through this in 2011 doesn't mean we're going to get through it today. And that's just the crisis that everybody acknowledges. There's also the banking crisis. So with the banking crisis, Rubini is saying, basically very similar to what I've been saying, which is that most US banks are technically near insolvency. In terms of dollar value of assets held, the failed banks are already comparable to 2008. And in fact, as of this week, they've passed them with 3 of the 4 largest bank failures in US history just happening within the last few weeks, okay? This is not like a small thing. It's not isolated. It's not that the banking crisis is over. Stanford study found that there's $2.2 trillion in unrealized loss in many other banks that are similarly exposed. And so, the issue is, though, if it's not just a debt ceiling crisis, not just a banking crisis, but wait, there's more. There's many more things that are breaking. So here's commercial real estate. Morgan Stanley thinks this could be worse than the financial crisis, okay? 40% downturn is what they're projecting. Here's the bond crisis. So 2022 is the worst year on record for bonds in a long time. That's because the government devalued lots of bonds, and everybody holds bonds, not just banks. Bonds were seen as a safe haven. That's a bond crisis, okay? It's not just banks that bought these bonds, and that's why in The Guardian they're saying, is this financial crisis 2.0 where the safe haven isn't safe? Guess who else bought bonds besides banks? It was insurance companies. Insurance is under pressure. Life insurers, for example, 70% of their portfolio in this study was bonds. And if you remember AIG in 2008, when the insurance company fell, the backstop fell out. And of course, it's not just life insurance, it's other things. You might say, well, life insurance isn't going to pay out. Turns out that the collapse in life expectancy has broken a lot of actuarial projections. So life insurers are sweating for money, and it's coming out of portfolios that are underwater for the same reasons as others, okay? How about the fiscal crisis? This is a partisan article, but it's true that there's $1.4 trillion in unfunded pensions, okay? Here's the auto loan problem. $1.4 trillion in auto loans with defaults spiking. Then there's the student loans. So these were put on suspend for 3 years. You have $1.8 trillion as a problem here, and payments are going to resume. You've got credit card debt. That's $930 billion, round up to roughly $1 trillion. That's also at all-time highs. And there's yet more things that are breaking globally, okay? You have the Ukraine crisis, where that's $75 billion directly, according to the Council on Foreign Relations, and it's more than $1 trillion indirectly. How do we know? Well, it's $800 billion just for energy subsidies in Europe, 800 billion euros, about 700 billion USD at last exchange rate. So that alone is just this massive thing, and of course the indirect costs of all the businesses that are failing because of all these spiking energy costs. You have de-dollarization. Some people are denying this happening. This is a whole video I could do on its own, but de-dollarization is happening at stunning pace, according to Stephen Jen at Bloomberg. There's China's yuan, there's India internationalizing its rupee. Many countries, dozens of countries, are partially or fully moving away from the dollar as a medium of exchange at a minimum, even if not as a store of value. Sovereign defaults are at a record high. Okay, so you have 14 sovereign defaults in 3 years versus 19 in the preceding 20. Okay, and the thing is that a lot of high net worth people are already seeing this. High net worth institutions are seeing this. They're already moving assets or doing things. So here's Alon just the other day saying he sees all the economic data in the world. He thinks the cemetery is filling up fast. Okay, and I think it's probably even more than a severe recession, but he's already there. Here's a map of millionaire migration. As of 2022, yes, people are leaving Russia, they're leaving China, they're leaving Hong Kong, and they're still coming to the US as of 2022, but the numbers are way down. It used to be 10,000 plus millionaires coming to the US in 2019. It's now about 1,500. It's an 86% drop in just 3 years, probably going to go negative. So millionaires are changing allocation and location. You have central banks outside the West loading up on gold. It's a colossal central bank buying. Look at that curve. It's just up and to the right. And so billionaires, millionaires, central banks, they're all seeing something coming and they're allocating. Not everybody, of course, but some smart money is doing that. And so then, of course, the question is, okay, but when? Everybody wants to know exactly when things are going to happen. So I don't have a crystal ball. My guess is 10% months, 70% years, 19% decades, 1% centuries, okay? I can give a case for each of those. That when I say 10% months, what I'm saying is, we have some serious crisis in months, or 70% I think it happens in years. And one way of thinking about this is sort of the, stay in dollars or exit spectrum. If you think the current status quo of printing can go on for an endless amount of time, the US establishment de facto believes it can go on for centuries, then you stick on one side. If you are seeing fire alarms, you're seeing klaxons, then you exit, whatever that means to you. Personally, as I said, I'm like 10% months, 70% years, 90% decades, 1% centuries. You should figure out what your own percentage is there. If you think that all of this is totally stupid, and the US, of course, has infinite hit points and the Fed can print forever, then you're at centuries and you should ignore all of this. But if you have some probability that actually system collapse may happen sooner than people think, then you should, take appropriate action, whatever that means to you. And then, of course, the question is, okay, well, how could printing start so fast? How could this whole thing unwind in like months or years? And remember when I said that we went from mild recession to financial crisis in 2 quarters in 2008? Just to give you a little bit of detail on that, here's how that went down. So March 16, 2008, massive bank failure. April 10th, 2008, Bernanke assures the world it's maybe a mild recession. September 15th, 2008, just 158 days later, okay, we're in the middle of the global financial crisis. And crucially, Yellen didn't warn you. This article came out years later. Yellen feared housing bust, but did not raise public alarm. That is what I'm doing at my own expense. I'm raising public alarm, okay? Now, if you fast forward, okay, the thing is, 15 years ago, collapse came in 158 days, but right now, is history repeating? Because in March of 2023, you have a giant bank failure where the Fed involved. In April of 2023, just almost 15 years to the day after these events of 2008, you have, again, the chair of the Federal Reserve getting up and saying it's going to be a mild recession. And God only knows how many days we have until, if and when, a fiat crisis happens. Is it exactly 158? Who knows? It's probably in the election year is when it might happen if political conflict gets to an extreme, but who knows? You really can't tell. What I do know is that when it does happen, Powell isn't going to warn you. He's still talking about a soft landing, okay, as opposed to hard landing. He's going to bring inflation down. It's just going to be a smooth ride, right? Already banks are dying. Things are blowing up. It's not really soft already. And as opposed to like a hard landing where it's bumpy. If you take that analogy of Powell as a pilot and soft landing, hard landing, there's another possibility, which is crash landing, okay? Here's Powell. Here's the pilot. He's the pilot of the economy. The dollars are flowing around the cockpit. He thinks he knows what he's doing. And you and I, we're just passengers in the plane. Okay, I don't have control over this economy. You probably don't. And the dollars are flying around the air. And so, if Powell is crashing the plane, and I believe he is, then the question is, how much time do we have? And I don't know. But I do know that when you're trading, yes, too early is the same as being wrong. Okay, but if you are preparing, then hell is truth seen too late. And so I've sounded alarm. I've done my duty in my view as a citizen. That's why I burned $1 million to tell you they're printing trillions.